Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the AJ Roberts Show of the London Times. I'm AJ Roberts, as you know, and today we're joined by Mr. Craig Schulze from all the way over from down under, down in Melbourne. As I mentioned on my socials, Craig will be joining us to talk about what's been happening in Victoria. As many of you will have seen, there's lots of sort of unsightly scenes that we're seeing across social media that's reaching us that we're not seeing on mainstream media. So I was really keen to get Craig on the show, having been on his fantastic podcast a few weeks back and understanding a bit more about his experiences. I thought it'd be a great opportunity to invite Craig onto my show to share with you guys about what's really going on down there. Now, Craig is an entrepreneur, a very experienced coach, an investor, and an international speaker where he's spoke all around the world, and on his podcast, the One Shot Movement podcast, which is all about having that one shot at this thing we call life. He's been lucky enough to interview 150 of the biggest names around, which he'll talk about more as we go on in the episode. But without further ado, Craig, welcome to the show, and yeah, tell us a little bit, or expand a little bit more about yourself, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to spending time with your audience. I think you summed it up fairly well. I am an entrepreneur, business person. I left home when I was 15, not because I wasn't loved, but because I didn't have much opportunity. And why I say that to people is when you leave home at such an early age, you often grow up quite quickly and you get street smarts and the ability to critical think and assess things, and self-finance from age 17, fired my boss 21, started a gym, that became 5, set up 22 franchises. So I've built business around the world as well. And I published a book, podcast, and along my journey of traveling around the world, I've been able to really have a look through a worldly lens. I've been involved in a number of interesting experiences along my journey. And a part of that, I've sort of started to pick up on the story that we've been living in the last 2 years, probably as far back as 2007. I could start joining dots on a few things back then. So last year, around April, May, I started to draw a bit of a line in the sand and become outspoken just at a level to raise some awareness. And, I guess it's really important to help wake people up and also provide them really good quality information that they're not getting from the mainstream media. So the last 14 months, I've been quite proactive in that awareness process. And here we are today.
Well, it's great to see you not covered in cuts and bruises like many of the other protesters we've seen on social media at some of these rallies. You've been to many of them. Do you feel that the current sort of scenes that we're seeing now have really ramped up compared to the first one that you went to?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting. Definitely massively changed, probably changed dramatically just in the space of a week. The footage through independent media really was fantastic last week. There was like running coverage for 12 hours a day, giving a real insight, because you certainly wasn't able to get that from the mainstream. But I think Melbourne, as you probably know, is the most locked down city in the world. And the rules that have been introduced from the chief health officer are just really inhumane. It's like stripping your complete and utter human rights away, and people have just started to have enough. And last week they trod on the toes of the construction industry, which is a huge employment base. And they basically said, no, this is not on. And you saw pretty wild scenes. I think you would have seen some pretty frightening and disturbing scenes where it really did look like a war zone. It's probably, your background, it might not reach that level, but the weaponry and the cars in the streets and the brute force, was just, quite horrific to see.
Yeah, and, we see that. I've shared a lot of it. We witnessed police actively shooting people in the back as they were running away. It was, just the way they handle people, levering people for like no reason. Seeing that poor old lady on the floor, like totally harmless. She had no weapon, like nothing. she was just on the floor, and they sprayed her in the face, and I've seen that video of that poor girl being strangled by the police officer. The list goes on. It could be all day, like with what we've seen, and just the sheer amount of police, whether they're Australian or not. I know there's a lot of reports saying that there's a lot of these so-called police officers are foreign nationals that are being brought in to bolster numbers, and like you said, the amount of unmarked cars, the huge amount of like anti-terror like vehicles you're seeing around, which is clearly the virtue signaling in terms of fear to the public. So it's almost to make you guys realize that, like, yeah, these guys are badass, they mean business type thing, like not to be messed with. But when you do affect something like the construction industry, which is a huge part of everyday life, and moving forward, to turn around and say, like, you all need to be vaccinated to work outside, let alone inside, or you cannot work, is stripping back everyone's fundamental human rights on so many levels. Not to mention breaking pretty much every Nuremberg code there is, and many other ethical codes that we have and laws. They've just completely bypassed that, like similar to like they're doing here in the UK, and also in the United States and Canada, and places in Europe. We can clearly see like the friendship bond that these countries have with each other, and the agenda is all very much on the same page, and we can clearly see that now. And I know a lot of vaccinated people who are clearly seeing what's going on, totally regret what they've done, but this is the point where we help them. However, they're fully awake to what's going on in Australia, Canada, United States, and even now here, and can't believe what they're seeing. So it's not just people that like haven't conformed to getting the experimental jab. It's people that have gone down that route already, but are not stupid, and they can clearly see what is going on. And it is alarming. I haven't lived in Australia myself. I've got so many friends there, got family there. It's something I've been keeping a very, very close eye on and reporting it back, as best possible to the people who follow my audience, which has been absolutely vital, because it's so important to get these images out and this real news and what's actually going on in other countries, because we, like here in the UK, we can end up seeing it on our shores. Boris Johnson already said a few weeks ago he's got, if he needs to, he'll impose an Australian style lockdown. So they already tell you what they're going to do. They're priming the public for what they want to do. And it's did you see any of that? Because what I saw with Australia is it kind of was like pretty mellow, and then it just went like shot right up, almost like full Nazism.
Yeah, look, I think it is a bit of I think for people that I did a post really early on last year of 4 levels of where people were at. And there's people completely asleep. There was people that could see at the time what, you could probably argue was a conspiracy, but people that were prepared to go beneath the layers could actually go, you know what, this is a type of technology in the jab. This is, the social credit model and the vaccine passport they're trying to implement. And, so that the people that were really awake to it all were like, this is happening, but they were sort of pseudo crazy people. Then there's people that just didn't want to know anything about it. And I said, there's just like this ladder, and people are like slowly moving through the ladder. But I think the agenda's sort of, been pretty hardcore and rolled out. I mean, our government in Victoria, that they have been, I would have to describe the restrictions as close to communism as you can get. Like, yeah. To share with your audience, for 250 days, 5 kilometer radius from your house, a few miles, 1 hour leaving your house for 5 reasons or 6 reasons now is to get a jab, curfew 9 p.m. Pretty much all businesses are shut except for the big, the big alcohol stores, the big supermarkets, the tradie. doors. Yeah. But the small personal training business, a small lady selling clothes in a clothes store, completely and utterly shut, restaurant shut except for takeaway. How are they supposed to operate under that sort of rule? And then they shut the schools down. So you've got 2 years effectively with kids not going to school. And it's just like on and on and on. And then you've got, this, I guess, police presence around the entire city where, I live right in the city effectively. And I went for a walk through the city the other day. I got asked 3 times for my driver's license and question, why are you in here? I said, well, I live here. I'm living in this spot. Aren't I allowed to even go for a walk now? I'm allowed to exercise 1 hour a day. I'm within 5 kilometers of my house and you're harassing me. It's just got really bad. Yeah, and there's no end in sight, to be honest.
Have you had any conversations with the police officers at all?
I not officially, like I haven't, walked myself into a police station or anything like that, but just a couple that I've bumped into that I've just had friendly conversations with. And but I do have a lot of contacts that, are married to a police officer, or, their best friend's a police officer. And, it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of some people really don't believe the agenda, or like last year didn't believe that this was going to be like it is right now. They just couldn't see it. But I think some are starting to wake up, but most, I would say, definitely not speaking out. There's been one hardcore police officer, his name's, I think, Alexander Cooney, who's just basically gone public, and he's starting to get some quite really positive I guess stories around him in the independent media space about, heroism, really what he's doing, because he's thrown his job in and he's speaking out, but he says that I'm speaking out for lots and lots of police.
Yeah, and I've spoken to friends who are actually British, who are police in different areas in Australia as well. And I think half the ones I've spoken to are leaving because they just don't want to be part of it. Which is great that they've got the strength to do that, and are confident that they can survive and go find other work and get involved with other stuff. And I think, well, I know the ones that are leaving have said they want to be more active in their communities and helping people, because that's what they joined for in the first place. Those kind of morals and ethics. But yeah, I was just interested to hear because, like I mentioned, I was speaking to police officers on Saturday when I was in London. I had a chat with a few, some of my other veteran friends. We're chatting to some about what their views are, and it's amazing to see. And obviously, you can't speak on behalf of every police officer when you speak to a handful, but it's amazing to see what their knowledge is, or lack of knowledge, of what's going on. So, like my friend I was with was speaking to one and asked, "Look, like, have you got kids?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, are you going to let your kids be jabbed with this, considering there's kids dying?" And he said, "Oh, well, is it not like any other jab you get at school?" And it's just like, mate, this is a London protest with people holding big, massive placards saying "Stop vaccinating children. Kids are dying. Kids are, there's always people with serious adverse reactions all around the world." Do not think to ask yourself, like, why are hundreds of thousands of people here marching against this? Like, why is that? And it just blows my mind. And they generally didn't think that there was anything really going on. But I think it's one of those industries, similar to like the military and other establishments, where you're just so used to following orders, it's a very much an I say you do mentality, isn't it? So and environment. So people, they just crack on and they just can't see it. But again, I think it's when you educate people, I think by having these low-level conversations, it definitely helps open up people's eyes a lot more. Because a couple that I spoke to, I said, "Look, have a look at this video," like whilst we were walking, and I said, like, "This is what's happening in Australia." I said, "Can you see this happening in our streets?" And they were just like, "What the?" And then they were like, "We've never used rubber bullets ever, I don't think. I can't see us using them." And I was like, "Well, if you start seeing orders of them coming in and the weaponry for them, you know what's coming." And he's like, "Yeah, that won't be happening here, mate. Don't you worry." I was like, "Right, okay, yeah." But at least it was a good opportunity to have those important conversations, rather than just stand on social media screaming, shouting, and our podcasts are very good for that, I think, aren't they? Because they're sort of like calm conversation with guests from different parts of the world who are showing people what's actually happening on the ground. That helps open up a lot more people's eyes, like, without doubt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for you personally, like, with this, like, 250 days of lockdown, kids aren't going to school, like, what is the science behind it, if any? So, I mean, when I mean that, I'm talking cases, because we've got 3 times almost the population here in the UK than Australia, albeit we're on a much smaller island. Yet your cases count is very, very low. Am I correct?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look at the not risk to rewards, not the right thing, but just on that point too, like the other industry that's been really dramatically impacted is the medical professional industry, where they're literally, if you don't follow our theories and our directions, you will lose your license. So a lot of the medical professionals are breaking their own rules of do no harm, and they're just not, and they are sticking to their guns on that too. I've had many conversations where they just said, look, I know what you're trying to say, but if I say anything counter arguing that point, I've lost my license. So it's really concerning that as well. But in regards to statistics, we have, these institutions that are funded by government that are providing models and so on like that. And that's where all these laws and restrictions and that have come from. But we in Australia in 20 months are just probably passing 1,100. So 1,100 deaths. Like that is in the best part of 20 months. On top of that, majority of those people have come out of aged care homes and above 70. So if you look at lockdown versus outcome, they just don't marry up. And you think about, at the moment, we are now, in regards to positive PCR test cases, which, as you know, are not necessarily a sick person, we are now adverse reactions on TGA site, nearly neck and neck with that in 6 months to the 18 to 20 months. So when you look at the harsh, brutal lockdowns that are causing extreme issues with mental health and suicides and bankruptcies and family issues and kids having issues 2 years not at school, and you go, okay, if you had to have a seesaw here, 1,100 people that are, unfortunately, my nan passed away last week and she was in an aged care home. She was 80. She did have dementia. That happens. Like, it just doesn't add up and doesn't make any sense. I said last year quite a lot, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 4. The media and the government are trying to sell that to you. And we have a common sense issue. And we need to make a mandatory vaccination for common sense, because that's just like gone out the window.
Yeah, I've said that many times. I said the biggest virus plaguing this planet is the lack of common sense, and it's in the countries in question. The ones that are rolling out the vaccines. Now, obviously, you've got like a large number of vaccine deaths as well compared to people that have actually died in the last 6 months of actually COVID, right? And we know because it's the same protocol in America, in Canada, obviously here in the UK, which I have people on a daily basis reaching out to me, nurses, doctors, people who are working in care homes, all telling me, like, these people didn't die of this, these people didn't die of that. They were given this drug, obviously, which is something that's becoming quite prevalent and has been used in all of these countries as almost like a procedure, and then the person's labelled as a COVID death. So what we're looking at here in the UK is pretty much the first wave, March, April last year in 2020, very much thousands, not just a few, thousands of elderly people, disabled people, people in care homes being sort of put onto midazolam, which was then put onto ventilators, and it was the same in hospitals. So people were sedated when they didn't need to be sedated. They were put on ventilation when they didn't need to be put on ventilators, and it's the ventilators that killed them. Then they're straight away labelled as a COVID death, and this was happening all throughout the country in March and April. I've recently had a funeral director on my show who spilled the beans all about this, because obviously he spoke to every single family who was, frothing at the mouth, like what's happened. The loved one was taken away from them, and we're actually still finding it's happening now. So I'm getting messages from people all the time saying, "Can you help me? We've gone into hospital with my family." They then put them on midazolam when they've gone in for something completely different, and he or she's now on a ventilator. We're like, what the hell? And that's what's happening. Like, there's a procedure now, and then they're being labelled as a COVID death. It's a scary time, and it's happening. The same thing's happening in America, Canada, Australia, France, Germany. It's the same method to get those numbers of COVID deaths. But the deaths from vaccines that you're looking at is actually like alarmingly going up, and in children. You've lost some children obviously as well because of the rollout to kids.
It's interesting, like just one other point on that. Out of the 1,100, 800 deaths really occurred from a hotel quarantine bungle last year from our state government. So when you take that out, we've only had barely 70 to 80 deaths just in 2021. So we're talking about small numbers in the whole scheme of things. But in regards to the reported deaths, the agencies that cover that information, they're still trying to, even though they're listed at the moment quite, probably 600, I think the last time I saw that, which was a week or so ago, but they're still saying a lot of those are under investigation. We can only confirm 9 of the 600 or whatever it is. So there's still a lot of media grayness in that side of the story. And what you would find, out of what I say to people, I didn't physically know one person that had the virus in 20 months. Yeah. I know a couple in America. I'm talking about in Australia. Mm-hmm. In 6 months, I know at least 5 people that have had to wheel themselves to hospital to do some sort of checkup, which you would say that's a vaccine injury. Do you just normally, cough your lungs up and have to go to hospital, or have a migraine that you think that someone's kicking you in the head? That's pretty alarming. So, let's see what happens in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and it's the same here. Like we're obviously in the northern hemisphere in the summer, going into autumn now, and I've never known so many people ill with flu-like symptoms, and actively talking about it on their social media. And every single one of them have had the vaccine. I totally know why, because obviously I've had enough highly qualified doctors and scientists on my show that's actually produce slides and all sorts to show why. It's because the spike proteins in the jabs are replicating en masse, massively reducing your immune system. So it's actually producing variants. We're actually finding this now. I'm on the phone this afternoon to a doctor that's running like these tests and analysis. There's a school here in the UK where a quarter of the kids didn't go for the jab, but 3/4 did in this class. Within 48 hours, the quarter of children who didn't get vaccinated all fell down sick. So obviously there's a lot of investigation going into like the immediate shedding and stuff like that through sweat and obviously respiratory vapor and stuff like that. So that's been a subject that's been on the forefront of people's minds for a long time, but we're clearly seeing a lot of evidence now that it is actually happening. I don't know how much like people have spoken about that in Australia, but I'm seeing it all over the place here in the UK. I've got a friend who's a massage therapist, says she's literally doesn't want to discriminate, but she's at the point where she doesn't want to have vaccinated clients coming anymore because she's unvaccinated and she's constantly bleeding from vaccinated patients or clients, which is it's extremely alarming. But it just goes to show, going back to what Karen Kingston said on my show, Dr. Richard Fleming, Dr. Jane Ruby, obviously all the other people I've had on recently, about it being the bioweapon, and it's absolutely doing its job.
Yeah, with the shedding one, you typically you only hear that through if you are looking for the information, like through Dr. Robert Malone, who's on your show, or someone like that. I don't see it in the community where people are, turning away, people that have been vaccinated yet. There's been, what I see, a really strong support and message of, anti-discrimination, where we want everyone in our business. My gym, they're trying to force the gyms, you can open, but just for vaccinated people, where I know he's like, no, we've got to open our doors because they've been shut for 20 months, but we need to do something as soon as we possibly can because we're all inclusive. So I think there's a really good Australian spirit around that. But there's a lot of fear and a lot of people that are scared. Like I don't acquiesce where I don't wear masks. I don't, do all the bull BS compliance things, but people are like, do wide berth walks around me where I'm sure they've had 2 vaccines and they're wearing 2 masks, but they go, oh, here comes a biohazard. So that's sad, I think, because they're watching the 11 a.m. press conference, the 6 p.m. news where they, blame the protesters, right-wing Nazis, as the government called them, and that's just not the case, and that's now just put them into a prolonged state of fear, which obviously bad for your health.
Yeah, exactly, mate. And I've said it for ages. It's one of my biggest sort of bugbears is like just walking into town, just seeing all the elderly, walk around with gloves on and masks and that, and it's just like these amazing people like built our country. Like put it, with their hard work and their taxes, have got it to where it is now. And it's like they're the ones that are being affected so terribly, as well as the kids and the teenagers, by these ridiculous policies. I just want to. I've had loads of conversations with them in public, and I've actually helped them. Just had conversations in coffee shops with elderly people, and just asked them, what's been your biggest fears throughout this whole thing, and you'd be surprised how much they'd be happy to talk to you. And then I shared some like vital information which they had no idea about. And I said, look, I know not most elderly people, especially in their late 70s and 80s, are privy to using a computer and stuff like that, using the internet. But I said that just as and when you can, like have a look at some of the people I've had on my show. You've been around long enough to understand a lot of like the medical side of things, the science, because you've seen all these changes through history and probably understand it more than most, and obviously the jargon and stuff. So it's been really great speaking to a lot of these people. And I had a lovely elderly lady come up to me in the coffee shop I usually spend some time at, and she asked to buy me a drink, and just out of nowhere, and I was like, hello. And she said that her daughter, who was behind her, sends all the links to my show, and she said since she's been watching it, she's not worn a mask, she's got out seeing her friends, and she feels like she's got her life back. And I genuinely like almost like broke down and cried about it, because to me that meant that that the message is getting out there and it is really, really helping people, which I know for a fact your show is as well, and obviously like Jamie McIntyre's. I know Jamie throws a lot more F-bombs, but the message is still very very similar, like, and people are taking it on board and then taking that information and implementing it into the day and how you see things. And I think that's been the critical thing, is how people see what's in front of them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been what I've seen in Melbourne and in Australia, I would say, but more so Melbourne and Sydney, that have been under pretty tough times, an uprising in humanity where everyone's now starting to do their little bit. Like last week, the construction industry, stood up on the ground. There's a landmark legal case happening here this week, fighting against these crazy mandates and restrictions in Sydney at the moment. There's a smaller political party called the Great Australia Party that are trying to restore our true constitution. Now, it'd be an interesting question for the lawyer, I think, Anna, you've had on your show before. Like, our government has appeared to have circumnavigated our 1901 constitution with the UK and introduced a thing called an Australia Act, which they've got now reference to a Queen of Australia. I don't understand all the details, but by listening to him, he said that's where our country's really gone wrong, and that's where the powers of these state premiers and that have really emerged through this fictitious Queen of Australia, and breaking away from, you know, trying to circumnavigate and that happened, I think, in the 1970s and 1980s. But he's challenging that as not lawful because it wasn't voted upon to do that by the people. There wasn't a referendum to do that. So you would need to follow him as Rod Cullerton, Great Australian Party, but they're really fighting hard to return to the Constitution and the monarch, and, you know, have the Queen of Australia, and, you know, that gives us our rights and everything back. So there's an uprising from all sorts of different angles. The COVID medical network is just growing by the day, with doctors speaking out, nurses are now speaking out, teachers are now speaking out. Yeah, it's great to see. And there's a lot more people receptive to go, you know, it's that old saying, you know, if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. People are not as conspiracy minded as last year because it's reality now. I say this is not up for debate anymore. There's books about it. It's splashed all over websites. There's that much, you know, content in the media. This is what it is. What are we going to do to get ourselves out of it?
Yeah, it is, mate. And unfortunately, we still have people to this day here in the UK that just like can't see it. But I think a lot of it's because we've suddenly, like, there's no one's wearing masks unless they want to in the shops and stuff like that. There's no like, oh, only 6 people to a table. There's like, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, it's very much relaxed. So it can go 2 ways. So this is what I believe. So if they all of a sudden try to come out of all these crazy, the cases have just suddenly gone through the roof, because they won't, because they've already said that the kids going back to school hasn't raised cases. So that model that they made on TV and put on TV saying, oh, this is what can happen as soon as the kids go to school, been totally debunked. So if they suddenly try to implement lockdowns now, there's literally, when we say like you can't base it on science, they literally are going to have to base it on absolute fallacy. And so that could really be in our benefit. However, if they did try and really implement it and people still believe the narrative, then God help them for the future. So there is a lot of people like that. And I find the ones that still very much don't see what's going on are the ones that are in either the military, veterans, police forces, in, you know, environments where they've just, you know, always continuously followed orders and just can't see what it is. But the people I spoke to that have, you know, tried calling me a liar or a dickhead, this, that, and the other, I just said to them, I says, look, you got to understand that I'm the one having conversations every single day with scientists, doctors, nurses, psychologists, you know, very highly qualified professionals from up and down the country and the world on a daily basis about what they're seeing, what's bullshit, like what the lies the media are actually feeding, what's actually happening on the ground. You're not. All right, so when you're actually having those conversations, come back to me and tell me that I'm talking shit. Because you're just regurgitating what the mainstream media is saying, which we all know is like, no matter what country you're in, is an absolute load of tosh, and they're the ones that are funded. They're biggest payers of the governments, aren't they?
Yeah, look, I mean, media controls the mind, and mind control has been a massive part of this problem to a point that we've talked about the fear, but our government's stolen all our freedoms and they give them back in breadcrumbs. So they'll say, oh, now kids are allowed to go to the park, as if that's like a wonderful thing. But, you know, last year it was, oh, guess what? You don't have to wear a mask outside now. So at 11:59 p.m., people don't have to wear a mask according to the rules. So they're not wearing a mask the next day. And I said, what's changed in the last 12 hours here? It's a decision that's been, told you that we're giving you some freedom back. So all of a sudden you've got a Superman cape on and think that you don't need to wear a mask. The virus isn't around anymore. Now, it just doesn't make any sense. As I said to someone, if our Premier Dan Andrews said at 11 a.m., if you wipe peanut butter and jelly in your butt crack, by 12, you've got like a shortage. Everyone's lining up to buy that, to get rid of COVID. If you wipe peanut butter and jelly in your butt crack to get rid of COVID, peanut butter and jelly sold off the shelf. That's how easy it is to control the mind through the TV. It's the biggest weapon out there. I think the CIA even refer to it as, TV programming for a reason. People are programmed.
Yeah, no, 100%, mate. And they've been doing it for years and years and years. And I think the more I've really delved into it, the last 12 months, the more you can clearly see it for what it is and what the TV does. If you actually take a look at, history over several years and what TV has done in terms of programming and everything and this is why, obviously, like I mentioned before, the elderly here in UK, and it'd be the same in Australia and other countries, like they've just been brought up watching the BBC. So, if they're retired, they get up in the morning, BBC News on, lunchtime, BBC News on, tea time, BBC News on, news at 10. And it's, it's like they're waiting to be told what to do. And then so the news tells them, you need to wear gloves and masks because, there's people dropping around down like flies. There's all these cases. And then so when they leave the house, they're like, the first thing they do, they put their gloves and their mask on before they even bloody grabbing their purse and handbags and that. And it's exactly that. It's programming. It's classic NLP, isn't it? And even NLP is being used when these so-called government ministers are there talking on TV. The way they say things as well is to absolutely do that. Is to program you. It's written for them. They don't just come out with all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I mean, I see great things happening over there in terms of Senator Malcolm Roberts. He's like, really fighting hard. Craig Kelly doing some, great things, fighting hard. Do you see much progress in what they're doing? Because the only reason I ask is because you have in the United States, you've got like the Senate, you've got governors of certain states that are fighting hard against what's going on. When it actually comes down to the crunch, the actual people running the show, whose train set it is, a full steam ahead still, and like, an evil agenda. It's the same here. You've got people fighting back here and speaking up within, within governments and sort of elected officials. Same in your place. Do you see like any real progress in what they're doing?
Well, interestingly, I think there is a bit of a change of the guard, let's call it there. And because Craig Kelly and Clive Palmer combining, Craig was an outspoken Liberal politician. Clive Palmer, has got a bit of money. So he's got the ability to fight the, what would you refer to it as? Well, the ability to put money into promotion, and he's got TV ads, billboards, newspaper ads, text campaigns. So they're like growing at an extremely rapid rate. Parties like Malcolm Roberts, and there's a few other smaller ones. Like I said, the Great Australia Party, Australia One with Ricardo Bossi, Reignite Democracy. So you've got all these miniature parties really starting to grow. And what needs to happen is more independents need to take the seats away. Like, I think the political system needs a massive overhaul, and that Australia Act thing could be the thing to do that, and maybe even remove the three-layer model, which is federal, state, and you've got the local government council, and get rid of maybe state in the long term. But they are growing, but the government is still the sort of like the duopoly is nearly like one party in its own right, and they're still calling the shots. They're still, got. I don't know for sure about this, but the way Daniel Andrews was able to pretty much give himself extended state of emergencies, that was only supposed to be a 6 month according to the Constitution, and he did supposedly got 3 independents on his side to get the balance of power to pretty much give himself a free rein for 2 years. That's supposedly running out on the 23rd of December, but I'm sure he's working on something behind the scenes. They've been shutting parliaments. It's an uphill battle there at the moment, but I think there's definitely a change of the guard, that's for sure.
Mm. And I mean, from the outside looking in, and everybody who's seen Dan Andrews, like, very much looks like a very dangerous man. But in terms of, like, if you got him in a room on your own, he'd probably go and hide in the corner. He clearly, it just seems like he's on a crazy power trip. The videos I've seen him saying, if you pull your mask down outside to eat or drink, you will be fined. Like, what kind of lunatic is this in charge of, the people of Victoria? It just blows my mind.
Yeah, look, I mean, he's been in for maybe the best part of a dozen years now. After going through the global financial crisis, got myself out of, the system, let's say. So I had business happening around the world, and I had zero interest in politics. And I heard of this guy who got into power by pulling the rug on a road deal that was already $1.2 billion spent. And he said that's what he won his election on. Now, that's just complete and utter commercial suicide. If you're running a business and you just say, oh, yeah, I've just spent $1.2 billion there, we're not going to do that anymore. You're the CEO, you've just lost your job. But then he did a deal, and I saw this in Zambia when I was there, of a country that was completely and utterly taken over by China, effectively under signing an agreement, which is referred to as the Belt and Road deal. And I'm in Zambia going, oh, you got a new airport paid for China, and there's all these billboards, and said, yeah, they paid for everything. And I said, that's a great deal. He goes, no, it's not. They own us now. So they can turn our electricity off if we don't comply. They can do this, they can do that. Daniel Andrews went against all the state of Australia and actually did that and signed that agreement with China. And, that would have pretty much made us owned by China. It would have given China, it still possibly can, a really good, strong foothold, in effectively Australia's probably biggest economic centre, but the federal government did come over the top and change something there to be able to block that. I don't know where all that's sitting now, but this is it's like closet communism, really, like amplified.
And do you think that a lot of these foreign national police that you're seeing are from the likes of China?
Well, I mean, our common friend Jamie has been talking about that for the best part of 12 months. Recently, the government's, changed a law or made an announcement that if we have these terror troops helping us out to protect our country, that they're nearly given immunity for committing crimes. So I'm only speculating, but it doesn't look good. I've sort of read the reports on them in recent days, and it's quite concerning.
Yeah, and obviously with the Dan Andrews making those kind of deals, especially with like China and that, do you think that's obviously paving the way for them to sort of co-finance the plans for the alleged smart cities that they want, obviously, to go up for, is it Melbourne all the way up like the Great Ocean Road type area, isn't it? Where, funnily enough, all those big fires were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I've read a little bit about that, but I think, all these bodies around the world, like the World Economic Forum and the WHO and United Nations, they all sound really great. And just for general Joe public person, including myself, until probably more recent times and looking into them, you think, oh, wow, our leaders are invited to G7 summit. And you're actually thinking that this is here. But now you're seeing these, smart city groups and what's happening there with international troops and all sorts of things that, that they're not what they seem. Like if you read the World Economic Forum book, that COVID-19, the Great Reset, that's harrowing type of information, and it's spread all over their website. You own nothing and be happy. Okay, thanks for that. So yeah, it's quite concerning. And Victoria, which again has always been referred to as the most livable city in the world, or in the top 2 or 3, is it because of being a part of these different organizations and get their rankings up because they are signing with smart cities and strong city networks and all these different organizations? I don't know. I'm speculating.
I suppose any time will tell, but I think there's if you've learned anything over the last few months, you can't take anything whatsoever at face value. I think the more you actually look into things on a grand scale, not just like local to where you are, I think you can really see what we're facing here in terms of like a worldwide takeover plan with the very elite running the show in a dangerous way. So I know Rainer Fulmish, the attorney who's done a lot of work among the so-called Nuremberg 2 trials. And for those who are actually watching, who are wondering, like, where are these trials, and you're expecting some courtroom full of like white helmets and stuff like that. It's not like that. All the people I spoke to who are kind of involved have said that what Ryan is doing is he's interviewing loads of specialists from around the world in the countries that are deeply affected by this, getting real life accounts, real life witness statements, real life science and everything else like that to then use in a big trial. So obviously all these interviews and stuff you're seeing with him on across all social medias and all the different platforms, and then you've got people going like, well, why are we just doing all these interviews? Why are we doing like a proper trial? That is basically this is kind of like the trial. These are like the early witness statements and that. So he did a great interview on my good friend Dan Gregory's Pandemic podcast recently. So please, guys, girls, check that out. And he explains a lot about this in detail, and like what level we are. Also that they've got a lot of evidence to suggest that there's about 3,000 people involved, sort of like across the top tier or across the top dome, as you might like to call it, obviously with the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and under them you've obviously got like the Vanguard Group and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundations, the Clintons, etc. They kind of like then pepper pot their way down, and it's just as further you go down, the more strings with puppets on the end you have, like in terms of prime ministers and chief medical officers and stuff, such like. Hence why Chris Whitty, the one man who's the chief medical officer here in the United Kingdom, has no children, no wife, kind of looks kind of satanic, really. Has overridden everything that the JCVI and all the other scientists have said about not inoculating the kids, and ordered the full vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds, while saying that he believes if they don't, they're definitely going to get COVID. And this is like a massive issue. I seen a great video the other day. People have actually putting them on notice. I'm not sure if that's something you've seen in Australia, where people are being given legal notice of liabilities. So I know that they went straight out to all schools as soon as basically this command came out that they were going to roll it out to all the children, that all schools were getting put on notice. So if anything happened to a kid, when they had the opportunity to halt it, then they would obviously be then liable. We're now seeing this literally as we speak. So a court case is happening right now as we're on this podcast in the UK about halting the rollout of vaccines on kids. However, yesterday a teenager died from heart failure, inflammation of the heart, and then passed away. So I believe the judges are going to be served a notice of liability and to actually appear in court, because they've already been given a notice of liability because they had the choice last week to halt the rollout and they chose not to. I believe the excuses were along the lines of lots of people are being employed to carry out the vaccination, so that would obviously then affect their financial status. And and also it would then undermine all the brilliant work that Chris Whitty's done. So this is the feedback that I've got from people like in the legal system, which is just mind-bogglingly alarming. So that's actually happening today. And unfortunately, it's not going to be the first time. It's, there's kids going man down all over the place. My local friend, his 17-year-old neighbour, passed away week before last. She got hit inflammation of the heart, internal bleeding, died within 24 hours. And I don't care what you say. Like, you can't say how people have reactions to jabs all the time. Swine flu was completely halted, stopped after 25 deaths worldwide. We're now looking at 1,700 reported deaths, and obviously they do try and miss the connection straight away. They try to bypass it as best possible. Well over 1 million adverse reactions. I mean, you guys have got several hundred there. America's got 45,000 plus. When does it stop? Many of these are children, and the problem is, and you've had the issue there, when they hounded all those kids into the football stadium, to jab them all over a weekend. You had kids going down with having fits and seizures. Some of them died. His parents being put on gagging orders by Pfizer and the Australian government. It's just absolutely sickening. And if people still think that getting your kid jabbed for something that they've got zero risk to almost is the best way forward, you seriously need to have a word with yourself, because that is your child that you brought into the world and have brought up all these years so far. That could be, I'm sorry to say, it can be ended like that because of the choice that you're making based off not following the science. Parents really need to get around other parents now, wherever you are, and just if it means having arguments with them. I think we're at the stage where you just need to look past that, because they'll thank you in the future. It's the common bear trap analogy that talk about, you and your child are walking towards that bear trap. If I don't tell you about it, and you land in that bear trap, and you knew that I knew, you're going to be upset. And if I see you walk into that bear trap, I'm going to be upset, and wouldn't know how to live with myself. So we need to be having these conversations, I think, now, as they're actively trying to jab the kids. And I do believe that that's one of the main agendas, is to get as many kids jabbed as possible, to sterilize them, stop them, having kids. Because we're already seeing it in America, the reports coming out there where they've tested loads of young males and found the majority of them were sterile. So we know that it's doing that.
No, I think that is probably a 2022 full rollout plan. They're talking about it. There was a report apparently that was a leaked report into the media of what they want to show us, what 2022 will look like. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully, a few court cases, a few people that get prosecuted for their liabilities, and things might start opening up.
Yeah, and it is starting to ramp up a lot here. There is they're building a lot of information, and especially towards people in certain industries where I use the military as an example. So commanders who are actively coercing their troops to get in it, to get in the jab, will be facing they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Just following orders doesn't count. I've spoke to countless lawyers now that are building up these kind of cases around the country, and these people are going to be hit with a steam train. Basically, I wouldn't want to be them people. And same in the medical industry, same in the police force, where they're actively saying you need to go and get this, or you're not going to promote, you're not going to be able to do these courses, you're not going to go anywhere in your career. You might likely lose your job, which these people are then going, obviously, to save their career, save their jobs, being told it's just like any other jab that you get every year, all this kind of stuff. These people are going to be in a sheer amount of trouble. They need to think about their long-term future. They really do.
Totally, I agree.
So for you, Craig, obviously looking forward, where do you see things going over the next sort of rest of this year, perhaps in Melbourne especially?
Look, I think, well, we're coming out of flu season. So technically, unless the flu season is now, a summer type of deal, we are on the opposite side of the season world as you. And, never before have we ever been talking about flu season pretty much consistently 12 months a year. But I put a little post out the other day that about what I refer to as the story, the hero's journey. And, there's always that big climax in the hero's journey where good versus evil is really like clashing, and like Star Wars, where there's just stuff for about 15 minutes going absolutely crazy. I think we're starting to get to that point. I mean, the tradies have probably backed off their everyday protesting, but there was a little group from nursing out this week. Teachers are starting to speak out. There are a few police starting to speak out. Then you've got a couple of lawsuits that are going to be really prominent if they can stop the rules. More people are waking up, more medical professionals are speaking. I can really see this melting pot of independent media is blowing up. We've got Rural Rukshan that picked up 200,000 followers in a week for what he did last week. You've got Morgan Jonas doing great things. You've got Jamie McIntyre doing great things. You've got all of these independent media. There's just a transfer. I think last week, just to give your audience some perspective, the Real Rukshan was filming on pretty much live coverage all day with his commentary over the top. He was peaking at about 70,000 views. Mainstream media, they were doing live coverage as well, had 4,000. And when the Premier spoke, there was only 2,000 people tuned into him. So there's this transition of, that, and in the end, it's people have just had enough. People have just absolutely had enough. There's all this political, warfare, let's call it, where Dan goes, "Oh, glad he doesn't have a real roadmap," and the federal government say, "Oh, you've broken the national cabinet plan," and they're just announcing this is our way back rules, and people are just going, "No, this is just absolutely garbage." Gladys said the vaccinated are out on the 12th of October, but the unvaccinated can't leave their rules until the 1st of December. People are just completely and utterly over it. And I think it is that hero's journey moment where people are just saying, enough's enough.
Yeah, but I saw as well that from the 1st of December, if you're unvaccinated, then you just get to go back to normal anyway. So and you don't have loads of graphene oxide in your body. So what's the deal with that? What have they actually achieved?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been, that came out yesterday, and it gave people hope that, okay, well, after, it's a bit of Stockholm syndrome, I guess. Only another 6 weeks like that. But I think she's come under fire today, and then she's retracted a few. It's politics. You just never know where you stand.
And this is the biggest problem we've had the whole way through, where politics and bureaucrats running health issues in every country. It's like they are running health issues in every single country.
That's what I wrote again about this. I said, look, I was a semi-professional sports person. I've ran fitness clubs for 12 years. I've never taken drugs in my life. I've never had a cigarette in my life. I eat healthy. I spend about $1,000 a month on nutritional supplements and things to help me with health and all sorts of, immune system stuff and digestive stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I don't take an experimental injection, I'm basically classified as a biohazard and a second-class citizen. This is being passed down by people that look unhealthy. Our Premier, I doubt he'd even be able to do 3 push-ups. He looks like a jellyfish. And most of these people are not much better. And they, mixing medicine with politics, overriding medical professionals that are are looking at peer-reviewed stuff and questioning it, and they won't allow any level of scrutiny. But someone like me that for 15 years has pretty much lived and breathed health is now soon to be considered unhealthy.
Yeah, it's the same wherever we're looking, like you're saying, and anywhere that's deemed a healthy place to operate, like a gym, personal training center, beauty therapies, like massage, all the rest of it. Anything that has to do with optimizing your health is deemed not worthy of staying open. But all the bottle-os and fast food centers and everywhere else like that just smash your health are allowed to stay open. And it's been during lockdowns, it's been the same in every country, hasn't it? Same in Canada, same in US and here.
Yeah, I mean, that's as bad as it gets, the World Sickness Organization.
Yeah, and do you know what? When I lived in Australia, my friends was like always like invested in stocks and shares, and he said he only invests in anything that's vice. So things that are bad for you. So I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I invest in tobacco companies, Coles, because they like own the licenses on the fruit machines, gambling, and loads of fast food and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, really? And he said, like, totally against everything he stands for. And he said, but it's from a financial perspective, he's made fortunes on it. And I was like, so why that then? He said, well, think about it. He says, when you've got no money and you're in a bad way, what do? You drink, you smoke, and you eat crap food. And I was like, oh yeah, fair enough. And he said, and what do you do when you've got loads of money? You drink, you smoke, and you eat crap food. And I was like, yeah, you're spot on. And he's still, and obviously even now, he's probably, I haven't spoken to him about it, but he's probably doing even better, because it's those type of companies that have been profiteering, hasn't it, from these lockdowns and from these this craziness that all these different countries.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, for my audience and people, and I really thoroughly suggest you do, guys, is follow as many credible people in Australia as possible. The likes of Craig, likes of Jamie McIntyre, Rural Ripshan, Ricardo Bosi, who's a former Australian SAS, isn't he? That's doing some really great stuff. He's done some really, really powerful videos. He articulates his message very well as well. So where can people find yourself, Craig, on social media?
Yeah, I'm most outspoken on Facebook, just my name. So Craig D. Schulze, you'll find me there. Social media profile. My website mainly leads to my podcasts and everything. So just my name, craigschulze.com. But, I see now, as I said at the start, my whole vision and mission prior to this was to inspire and educate people to make the most of their one shot at life. Now, for me right now, I see it as a two-phase thing. I still believe in my message more than ever. Like, people have backs to the wall when they're really, really struggling. And I want to help people navigate the fog of this situation. So wake up and strategies and so on. But yeah, moving forward, we will move into a bit of a new world. So, and that new world, when we come out of it, there's going to be more opportunities. There's going to be more people that need help to grow and evolve, to make the best version of themselves. And that's a phase 2 for me.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And yes, guys, please check Craig out. Follow what's happening in Australia very, very closely. The last thing we want is for some of those policies to start creeping away into the UK, because we're seeing it probably more here than any other country, the way things are just sliding in really sneakily under the device of something else. So things like COVID passports, like under the guise of the NHS app and stuff like that. It's actually a really, really sneaky way of doing things. So please keep an eye on what's happening in other countries around the world. And myself, obviously on the AJ Roberts Show, will continue to bring you guests from around the world to give you real insights onto what's actually happening on the ground in these countries and in places where we're seeing such horrible tyrannical and draconian measures and treatment of, you know, the beautiful people of Melbourne and in Victoria and in Sydney and places like that, and other places around the world, like in Canada and France. So look forward, guys, to some more people from these countries coming onto the show, as well as some quite highly prolific doctors and scientists who are going to really tell you how it is and continue to do so. Later on this week, we've got the pleasure of having the amazing Dr. Brian Ardis on the show. We're going to go deep into the serious issues which are being found out to do with midazolam and remdesivir, which is obviously a very, very nasty drug, which is affecting people in early stages, again, then being labelled as COVID deaths. He's going to give all his fantastic professional insights on that and evidence. It's all going to be evidence-based. I'm also going to be joined by Stuart Wilkie, who's been on the show before. His mother and father, unfortunately, were murdered 6 days apart with the use of midazolam here in the UK. So please look forward to that show. And then coming up, we're going to have a lot more doctors who specialise in certain key areas. And again, the point of these type of shows and the order that we're getting them on is to help you guys build a really clear picture of it and actually add them to a timeline of events so you can really see what's happened and just how sinister and huge this is, and just how deep the plan is and how far back it goes. This isn't something that just happened overnight. We know this virus was made in a lab. We know it was released. We know that it was funded by Dr. Fauci and the NIH. So, you know, working sort of backward from now till there and moving forward, you can see how they've like basically indoctrinated all these different elements into all these different countries, depending on what season we're in and what hemisphere. But I'd like to take the opportunity, Craig, to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, mate. I know it's worrying times over there, you know, and you're doing amazing things, mate, like making people aware on your side of the world what's actually going on and what to look out for, and also offering lots of solutions, which is, you know, fantastic and exactly what we need. You know, so on behalf of my audience, to you, mate, please keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, and great to be on the show, and let's keep in touch.
Awesome, man. Okay, guys and girls, going to love you and leave you there. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you subscribe to the AJ Roberts Show on YouTube, as well as my Rumble channel. It's just one word, AJ Roberts Show. Please make sure you subscribe on there, because obviously some videos get booted off YouTube as quick as they go up. So please make sure you subscribe on there, and same again on Telegram. It's just AJ Roberts Show on Telegram. But until the next episode, look after yourself and remember, stay strong. Cheers, guys.